Now recently some changes were made to the Knowledge of London examination process, with some drivers saying that it's the beginning of the end, that it's going to be so easy, there's going to be no gold standard that we are used to with London cabbies. So I'm going to explain the main changes that have happened and what my honest thoughts and opinions are. The first and main change is an update to the redlining process. Now the way that it works in Knowledge of London exams is that you have to satisfy a certain standard before you can get onto the next level. You have to progress through certain levels, or they call them stages, to eventually get your badge. 56s, because they're held every 56 days or 2 months. Then as you get better, you then do them every 28 days, every month, and then 21s, 21 days, 3 weeks. And you have to satisfy a certain amount of passes before you can get onto the next stage. Or if you accrue a certain amount of failures, you can go backwards. That's what the Redline system does. Now I'm going to simplify the knowledge examination system to a pass or a fail, a C grade or a D grade. You do get a B grade and you can get an A grade as well, but it's unlikely it can happen. A C, effectively a pass, can still be quite a difficult score to get, but that is what I and many other knowledge students will be aiming for. So effectively, you need to be able to get 4 Cs to progress onto the next stage. However, if you get 4 Ds, you will go back to the beginning of that stage. It's sort of like a penalty shootout, because every time you go up there, you will either get a pass or a fail. Pass or a fail. You can't come out with like ungraded or whatever, it's a pass or a fail. And this is what can add a lot of time to the examination process. Okay, so if you accrue 4 Ds or 4 failures on a given stage, you have to go back and start that stage again. How it used to work was that if you repeated that process again and accrued 4 more failures, you would then go back to the preceding stage. And this is another level of brutality, because you could be on the very final level of exams. You could be in touching distance of your badge. But if your standard slips, you then have to repeat that stage, and then you can get knocked back to the preceding stage. You can then really screw up again and get knocked all the way back to the very, very beginning of the knowledge. No previous examination has any merit because you've been knocked all the way back to the beginning. Now, what the implemented changes have done is that you can't be redlined or be knocked back down previous stages. You can end up with 4 failures and then you get sent back to the beginning of that stage. Fail again, you will stay stuck on that stage until you can get through and pass. Because look at it this way, it might take you 2 years to get to that final exam level, but then just because of a few circumstances that change in your personal life that then affect your examinations, you might get knocked all the way back again and then add more years onto your knowledge journey. But it certainly doesn't make the process any easier, because you can still accrue a lot of time on the knowledge. What it doesn't do though, is it doesn't send you all the way back to the beginning, which I can only imagine to be the most demoralizing thing in the world. There must be loads of potential cab drivers out there that have had this red line happen to them and they've had to throw in the towel because it's been too much of a strain on their family, their relationship with their other half. It might not have even been caused because of an inadequacy of their knowledge. It might have been caused because they might have had a really tricky examiner a few times on the bounce. They might have had a couple of times where the nerves got a bit better of them. You can only imagine it if you're right on that tie, that penalty shootout where you can score and you will go forward, or if you fail and you will go backwards. That must be the most unbelievable amount of pressure. So it's not hard to see why certain people do crack under these circumstances. But the way that it's not built into the system anymore, where we can't go back through stages, I think is really good, because it still keeps the standard high. You can only get your badge by accruing passes, so they're not exactly given scores for easier criteria. It's just ensured that people that get knocked back don't go down this spiral of doom, if you will. In theory, you can still be redlined and sent back, because what they have implemented is a system whereby you are reviewed after a certain amount of years, dependent on which stage you are on. An examiner will call you in for a meeting and say, well, look, what's going on here? Why aren't you progressing? And This will happen on other stages as well. The second change has been to obstacle runs, or technical questions as they're sometimes called. Now, candidates had a multitude of ones to look out for. Things like no lights runs, leave on the left or leave on right only, or this road is closed, you can't use this road. So of these, the no lights runs have now been scrapped. They do come in handy in the cab sometimes because it's a different way of thinking about formulating your route, but it's quite brutal and very hard to study for. And it also is kind of understanding what light is a no light run, because largely the interpretation of a no light run was that it was like major junctions, one direction of traffic and another direction of traffic. But it didn't include things like pedestrian crossings, for instance. So then it's not a no light run at all, really. So it's kind of weird. One that used to come up when I was on the knowledge was being able to get from an area like Cadogan Square down to World's End without using the King's Road or the Fulham Road. You could get all the way there without using traffic lights. And sometimes I will still use certain sections of that when I'm out driving today, because it can be really good at beating the traffic. They have now since been withdrawn. They are not allowed to be asked in examinations. So that makes it much fairer, because it then means that rather than focusing on these little nuances of a certain area, candidates can focus on more important things like route planning across London, or collecting more points, whatever it may be. Because very rarely, in fact I don't think ever, has a customer ever got in my cab and said, "Oh, can you take me to this place? But please, I don't want any traffic lights at all." I don't think that's really conducive to good knowledge. You can learn that once you're out in the cab, and you can build up this. Other obstacle runs, such as leave on the left only, set down on the left only, or can't use this road because it's closed, have now been limited to just one question, and only when you are on the final stage of the knowledge. I did actually lose some points on a few appearances because I was overly hesitant or overly anxious in the way that I could set a particular area. I never really found road closure runs to be that bad, because having a road closure actually makes your thinking process a lot easier. If an examiner said, "Look, take me to the Science Museum, but don't use Prince Consort Road," it cuts down your thinking opportunity. You just think, well, I'll just skip around that. I'll go this way then. There were some examples of some extreme ones, out in the real outer areas of London, where examiners would go, can't use that road, or that road. And I think that was really pushing it. But now they're just limited to one single question on those final stages of the knowledge. That's when you are very close to being a cab driver. So you need to start thinking in these ways that you do on a daily basis as a working driver. The other type of run as well that's been limited is multiple drops. One examiner who many people actually quite revered and had a lot of respect for because of his runs being so good across London was Mr. Thomas. And he used to ask these quite a lot. He'd say, "Look, can you take me from Putney Library to Royal Oak Station, but can you drop me at Notting Hill Gate on the way?" So effectively what this then does is it doubles the amount of questions, because now this isn't just one route that you're then calling. You're now having to do two separate routes or two questions. Yeah, I get that, but an examiner can ask you like a really long route anyway, which would be the equivalent of doing like two routes, I guess, because you're having to call more street names. If they give you a short run, you're calling less street names. That's less chance to screw up, I guess. And now that these new changes have been implemented, I'm not looking at it from the perspective as, oh, it was so much harder in my day, we could have been asked so much worse stuff. But what it's now done is it's made it a much more fairer and more understandable system. There was always so much controversy and guesswork on the forums of people saying, can we set this on the left? Can we do this? Can we do that? Oh, my mate of a mate got slaughtered by this examiner because he done it entirely wrong. The examiners aren't making it any easier. They're not saying, right, you can now get a pass in an easier way. The pass standard is still high, but just the expected norms on the way to that pass are a little bit more predictable. And the removal of these tricky runs or obstacle questions might have made a few of my questions a little bit easier, but it still would have been a challenge in itself, and you still have to demonstrate a good level of knowledge. So I couldn't categorically say that it would have got me through the knowledge any faster. Let me know your thoughts and opinions. Is the removal of obstacle runs and redlining from the knowledge a good or a bad thing? Take care, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye bye.